Well, joining us now are parliamentary sketch writer Quentin Letts and former Downing Street advisor Leon Emirali. Quentin,
You're not going to ask me about maths, are you?
I might do. No, I'm going to ask you about, is this a government in panic mode?
I suspect so, yes. I should be looking at their opinion polls. But actually, looking at the forward briefings on this budget, it all sounds rather boring, which suggests they're a bit more confident than otherwise. I mean, we voters, we're all desperate for a tax cut. Hit me with a tax cut, baby. But what we really want is to wake up tomorrow morning with a wad of £5 notes in our hands. And it doesn't work like that, does it? So it sounds as though it may be a national insurance tax cut or some sort of business tax cut. It's all quite boring. So it's going to be a way down the track, and there won't be that instant gratification that I particularly like.
I think bring Leon in, because you worked in the Treasury.
Yeah, you're going to go to an expert.
I mean, the issue is, it's all about timing. We're sat here going 12 months to the next election, right? 23 points behind in the opinion polls is Rishi Sunak. It was 18 when he took over from Liz Truss, for goodness sake, and we all remember what happened last November. But it smacks of, Leon, right? It smacks of, there's 12 months to go. I'm going to play my hand now in the hope that it maybe generates a bit of interest, but it'll take months for this stuff to come in. If you were advising the Chancellor this morning, you got 25 billion, which somehow has just arrived from under a table. I don't know how I got there. Would you be saying businesses? I've been asking this all week. Would you be saying the pound in the pocket? Because the cost of living crisis is still central to people, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And I think Quentin says it's boring. I think that is the strategy here. I think it is intentionally boring, because we all remember what happened last time there was a fiscal event. It was Liz Truss's mini budget. It all went a bit wrong. So I think what they're looking to do now is steady the ship. Having said that, we are now in a position where the fact that inflation is flatlining, perhaps the Chancellor can start being a little bit more generous when it comes to those tax cuts that Quentin wants and a lot of Conservatives want. And I think now we are in the environment where he can be more generous, but it ultimately has to be those tax cuts that are headline grabbing, that are retail politics, so that people can see in their payslip at the end of next month, oh yeah, I'm better off.
But it won't happen that quickly, though, will it? It won't happen that quickly.
It won't happen that quickly, and this is the big problem Rishi Sunak's got. He's got this autumn statement, and he's got another budget most likely before the general election. Now, is that enough time to really turn things around? Is that enough time for people to start feeling it in their back pockets? I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced at all. But he's been hamstrung because the wider economic outlook dictates ultimately what he can and can't do.
And you said to one of our producers that you wanted to see something a little bit closer to the mini budget that we saw last year, but the timing is slightly different.
Timing's different. The mini-budget went all wrong because you cannot cut taxes when inflation is rising. Ultimately, you need to restrict people's spending when inflation rises. Now that inflation is flatlining, I think actually we are in a position to see tax cuts and for them to be beneficial, not just to individuals, but also to the country. So I think now is the time to go for growth. It may be too little too late, Nicola, is my concern. But, you know, I think he's got the right outlook.
Quentin, I wanted to put this to you as well. I keep saying it, but I want to garner interest and opinion across the political spectrum. I've always seen the Labour Party as this sort of slightly out-of-control unit that promises the earth to everybody. Every time I spoke to Darren Jones with Nick this morning. There seems to be sort of a sensible, calm, fiscal desire not to promise what can't be achieved. So Rachel Reeves today, Shadow Chancellor, will have to take on Jeremy Hunt and respond. They're not saying an awful lot, Labour, because they actually don't need to, do they?
No, they don't need to electorally, probably. But actually, long-term, strategy-wise, what she should probably stand up today and say, she should say, we're spending too much. My goodness, she'd win some votes that way. Because that's the real truth of this, is we spend too much.
On what?
Well, pensions, public sector. We spend too much on roads.
Roads?
We spend too much on the health service.
Why is the entire road system covered in potholes?
So much of it is wasted. It's wasted on bureaucracy and on officialdom. And we also waste far too much on debt payments because we've borrowed too much in the past.
What would you do with that 25 billion today? Would you have done businesses to create green shoots in the economy, but that won't filter down for months? That's not going to buy votes. Or would you put the pound in people's pockets? What would you do?
To be honest, I haven't got a clue because I'm not an economist.
Do you think they do?
No.
Leon, as a former advisor, they've kind of hedged their bets here by decreasing that national insurance by 1 percentage point, where it's going to affect businesses and be beneficial to people who are working.
Yeah, they have done. And I think the thing that's missing here is actually the thresholds that we haven't spoken about yet. The reason why the government is raking it in is because we're all paying more tax.
Yeah.
Because we're earning more, but the thresholds
70-year high.
remain 70-year high. So what the government should have done, I think, is actually change those thresholds. Less people are paying less tax.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that has to be the end solution. But whether or not they do that, it's such a money spinner for the government right now. Perhaps they can't afford to. But Quentin's right. There is so much waste in the public sector that they really need to clamp down on that. And we're going to hopefully hear about not just what they're cutting, but also how they're going to create those efficiencies within government as well.
It's worth pointing out, 70-year high we're paying. The old French are getting hit much worse. Oh, Froggy Francois, his tax is higher than ours.
And we've given them 500 billion quid for immigration. I don't want
so,
to
I mean, you know...
Million.
Do not...
Or is it billion?
Do not consider emigration to La France.
Can I... No, don't start on that with me. We'll be here all morning. Can I ask you both? We put out this is the autumn statement, his last chance to turn it around. Patrick would sum up what most viewers and listeners have said this morning. He can't turn it around. The only way this clown wins is if Labour loses it. The next election is a done deal, says Patrick online this morning. Thoughts on that, Quentin Letts?
Who's Patrick? I don't know.
It doesn't matter. Patrick's a viewer.
The
He
viewer.
says it's too little too late.
I
Sunak can't turn it round.
I disagree with Patrick.
You think he can turn it round?
Yeah, look, do you remember how far ahead Theresa May was in the opinion polls?
Yeah.
Just 2 weeks before the election, she was still ahead. And then old Corbyn caught up, didn't he? I mean, things can happen. And once people start looking at Sir Keir boring Starmer, I don't know. Maybe it isn't a done deal.
Leon?
You say Sir Keir boring Starmer. However, he's, 11 points ahead at the moment when it comes to polling on fiscal responsibility.
I resist the tyranny of opinion polls.
OK.
I wait for the real thing.
You wait for the real thing.
Leon, what do you think? So many people this morning saying Quentin different, and many Tories would hope that Quentin's right, but most people are saying it feels like this almost is the last throw of the dice, if we're being honest, right?
Yeah.
Can he throw 2 sixes?
It's going to be incredibly difficult for Rishi Sunak, but it's not over yet. I think once we get into the end game when it comes to the campaign, when it becomes presidential, you've got Rishi Sunak, you've got Keir Starmer. I think when that happens...
Doesn't really light you up, both of them, really, does it?
They don't, but I don't think Rishi Sunak is necessarily as polarising as maybe Liz Truss was, as even Boris Johnson was. I think, actually, he's fairly centre ground, Rishi Sunak, to a lot of people, is his perception.
But, sorry, Nick, just very quickly, is that enough to generate that sort of interest, being that steady, straight down the middle man?
Well, it could be, because Labour aren't necessarily offering anything particularly inspiring, so maybe the British public will say, better the devil you know.
It's Major v Kinnock again.
Right. So if there's not much policy difference, there's not much clear water between the Tories and Labour as at the moment, what do you suspect is going to happen over the next year? Do you think that this is going to be an election that is fought on culture wars issues? Because the Tories certainly doesn't feel like they've got anything to get over Labour with policy.
At some point, the Labour Party is going to have to, a bit like the Princess of Wales, show us a bit of inside leg. And they're going to have to say what their proposals are. And at the moment, we don't know about that. Now, they may be very crafty devils, and they may be like Baldrick. They may have a cunning plan. But there's nothing indicating it at the moment. And if Reeves today doesn't stand up and say, we've got to have lower spending in future, she can't just welcome the tax cuts and then say we're going to spend more money, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that.
It's a very interesting situation, and for all of us, the next 12 months are going to be fascinating politically as to who takes the lead, who shows some initiative. It's interesting listening to what people are saying. Quentin Letts, as ever, thank you so much. And Leon Emirali, come back, both of you. Thank you so much indeed.